The Panzer IV's gun was pointed directly at Hauptmann Ernst Müller's face when he realized his loader was about to get them all killed. It was 0621 hours, October 3rd, 1943, somewhere in the frozen mud outside Dnepropetrovsk, Ukraine. The temperature was minus 12 Celsius. Ice had formed on the inside of the turret, and through the gunner's optic, Müller could see the Soviet T-34 emerging from behind a burning farmhouse, 380 meters out. Turret already traversing toward them. His loader, Gefreiter Hans Kemper, was fumbling, his gloved hands pawing through the ammunition storage like a blind man searching for his keys in the dark. The armor-piercing round he needed was somewhere in the sponson rack, buried behind 3 high-explosive shells, 2 smoke rounds, and God knows what else. 5 seconds passed, then 6, then 7. The T-34's gun stopped moving, locked on target. Müller could see it through the optic, that dark circular void of the 76 millimeters barrel, black as a mine shaft, aimed straight at his soul. 8 seconds. Hans, for the love of... The T-34 fired first. But here's what nobody expected, what even Müller himself wouldn't understand until 3 hours later when he was sitting in a muddy trench drinking ersatz coffee and trying to stop his hands from shaking. Hans Kemper wasn't slow, because he was incompetent. He was slow because the system was broken, because the official Wehrmacht loading procedure, written by officers who'd never spent a day in combat, who'd never felt the crushing panic of knowing you had 3 seconds to find the right shell or die, was fundamentally, catastrophically stupid. And in exactly 11 days, Hans was going to fix it. He was going to do something so simple, so obvious in hindsight, that senior officers would later claim they'd thought of it first. Something that would cut German reload times nearly in half, that would turn Panzer IVs from adequate tanks into killing machines, that would be quietly adopted across multiple Panzer divisions without ever appearing in any official manual, because no one wanted to admit that a 19-year-old farmhand from Bavaria had outsmarted the entire German armor corps. But first, they had to survive this morning. Hans Kemper wasn't supposed to be a tank loader. He was supposed to be working his family's dairy farm outside Rosenheim, milking cows and harvesting hay, and living a quiet life that didn't involve Soviet anti-tank rounds screaming through steel plating. His father ran 40 head of cattle. His mother kept chickens. Hans had 3 sisters, all younger, all expecting to take over the farm when their father got too old to work. He was good at it, too. Patient, methodical. He had a knack for organizing things, for creating systems that made hard work easier. In the barn, he'd arrange the tools by frequency of use. Pitchforks and shovels near the door where you needed them most. Specialized equipment, hoof trimmers and cattle prods and such. Further back, everything had its place. Everything positioned so you could grab it without thinking, even in the dark, even when you were exhausted from 14 hours of work. His father used to say Hans thought like a clock, everything timed in position and efficient. The Wehrmacht called it something else. They called it obsessive, unnecessary. When Hans arrived at the Panzer Training Depot in Munster in June 1942, his instructor, an old veteran named Feldwebel Kraus, who was missing 2 fingers on his left hand, watched Hans organize his footlocker for the 3rd time and shook his head. Kemper, this isn't your mother's kitchen. You grab whatever shell the gunner calls for, and you ram it in the breech. It doesn't matter if it's pretty, but Hans couldn't help himself. Even in the barracks, he organized things. His spare uniforms folded in order of season. His personal items arranged by frequency of need. His bunkmates mocked him for it, called him Hausmädchen. Housemaid. Nobody was laughing now. The Eastern Front in October 1943 was where German armor went to die. The Soviets had numbers. Endless, crushing, incomprehensible numbers. For every T-34 the Germans destroyed, 2 more appeared. For every defensive line they established, the Soviets found a way around it, through it, over it. The Panzer IV, Germany's main battle tank, was technically superior to the T-34 in some ways. Better optics, better radio communication. A competent crew could outfight a Soviet tank one-on-one. But the Soviets never fought one-on-one. They attacked in waves, in groups of 5 and 10 and 20, accepting horrific losses because they could afford to. German crews couldn't afford losses. Every tank mattered. Every kill mattered. And speed, the speed at which you could get rounds downrange, mattered more than anything. The official Wehrmacht manual listed the standard reload time for a Panzer IV at 6 to 8 seconds. In practice, under combat stress, it was often 10 seconds or more. The T-34, with its cramped turret and less experienced crews, was slower, sometimes 12 to 15 seconds. That advantage kept German crews alive. But Hans's crew, 3rd Platoon, 2nd Company, 16th Panzer Division, was slower than most. Müller, the commander, was excellent. Gefreiter Otto Schmidt, the gunner, was one of the best in the company. But Hans was new, 6 weeks in the field, still learning, still hesitating. The ammunition storage in a Panzer IV was a nightmare. Shells crammed into bins along the turret floor, in the sponson racks, in the hull next to the driver. Armor-piercing rounds mixed with high-explosive rounds mixed with smoke rounds. No organization. No system. Just grab whatever you could reach. In theory, the loader was supposed to memorize where everything was. In practice, under fire, with a turret full of smoke and the tank rocking from near misses, and your commander screaming in your headset, you grabbed blindly and hoped you got lucky. Hans hated it. Hated the chaos, the inefficiency, the stupid randomness of it all. And after that morning outside Dnepropetrovsk, after the T-34's round hit their turret at a shallow angle and deflected off instead of penetrating, after they spent 8 hours immobilized waiting for recovery vehicles while Soviet artillery walked closer and closer to their position, Hans decided he was done following the manual. The idea came to him at 0230 hours, 3 days later when he couldn't sleep. They were in a rear assembly area, 15 kilometers behind the front line. The company had lost 2 tanks that week, 5 men dead, 3 more wounded badly enough to be evacuated. Everyone was exhausted. Everyone was scared. Hans lay in his bedroll inside the tank, staring at the dark curve of the turret above him, and thought about the barn back home. Tools arranged by use, by hand position, by the natural motion of reaching and grabbing. Why couldn't ammunition work the same way? He sat up, pulled out his notebook and a pencil, started sketching in the darkness. The Panzer IV carried 87 rounds of 75 millimeters ammunition. About 60% were armor-piercing. 35% were high-explosive. The rest were smoke or specialty rounds. The gunner called for AP rounds maybe 70% of the time in actual combat. He rounds 25% of the time. The rest was situational. So, why were they mixed randomly in the storage racks? Hans drew the turret layout from memory, marked where his hands naturally fell after closing the breech, marked the closest racks, the ones he could reach without looking. Those should hold AP rounds, the most common call. The next closest should hold the furthest should hold the specialty rounds you rarely needed. But it was more than just separation. It was about position, about hand path. When the breech opened, Hans's right hand naturally fell to waist level, slightly to his right. That position, that exact position, should hold the next most likely shell, not 3 feet away, not buried behind other rounds. Right there, ready. He worked through the math. If he could cut even 2 seconds off each reload, that was 2 seconds they could fire before the enemy fired. 2 seconds they could reposition. 2 seconds that meant survival instead of burning alive. The next morning, during a maintenance break, Hans approached Müller. "Herr Hauptmann, I have a request." Müller looked up from the map he was studying. He liked Hans, thought the kid had potential, but he was clearly still green. "What is it, Kemper?" "I want to reorganize our ammunition storage. I have a system that can make reloading faster." Müller frowned. "The storage arrangement is standard across all Panzer IVs. It's in the manual." "Yes, sir, but the manual is wrong." "You didn't say that. You didn't tell an officer that Wehrmacht doctrine was wrong." Müller's expression hardened. "Explain." Hans pulled out his notebook, showed him the sketches, walked him through the logic. Organization by probability of use. Positioning by natural hand motion. Reduction of wasted movement. Muller studied the drawings for a long time. He'd been in combat for 2 years. He'd seen good loaders and bad loaders. He knew, in his gut, that Hans was right. The current system was inefficient. But efficiency wasn't why men followed doctrine. They followed doctrine because it was doctrine, because someone higher up said so, because deviation meant chaos. "If I let you do this," Muller said slowly, "and it doesn't work, and we're slower instead of faster, men die." "Yes, sir." "If it does work and we report it, and headquarters decides we were tampered with equipment without authorization, we could face discipline." "Yes, sir. And you want to do it anyway." "I think it will save our lives, sir." Muller looked at Schmidt, the gunner, who'd been listening quietly. Schmidt shrugged. "Can't hurt to try. We're already slow." Muller folded the notebook closed, handed it back to Hans. "You have until tomorrow morning. If it slows us down even once in combat, we change it back." "Understood." "Understood, sir." Hans worked through the night. He pulled every shell out of the storage racks, inspected them, sorted them by type. The AP rounds went into the ready rack on the right side of the turret, positioned exactly where his hand would fall after the breech opened. He staggered them, alternating nose positions, so he could grab them without looking, just by feel. The he round went into the left side rack, close but not immediate. The smoke rounds and specialty ammunition went into the sponson bins, furthest away, because they were called for maybe 5% of the time. But it wasn't just about separation. Hans did something else, something no manual would ever suggest. He marked each position with tiny scratches in the metal, barely visible, just enough that his fingers could feel the difference in the dark. He practiced the motion. Close breech. Hand drops right. Fingers find the first shell by touch. Lift. Spin. Load. Close breech. Hand drops right. Over and over. 50 times. 100 times. Schmidt watched him for a while, then climbed into the turret to help. "You really think this will work?" "I know it will," Hans said. "Back home, I could find any tool in our barn in the dark. This is the same thing." "A barn isn't combat zone." "No," Hans agreed. "But the principle is the same. Your body doesn't think in a fight. It just moves. So you set things up so the movement is right." By dawn, the ammunition was reorganized. Hans climbed out of the turret, exhausted but satisfied. Muller inspected the work, said nothing, just nodded. 3 hours later, they got the order to move up. The attack came at 1,340 hours, 11 days after that morning outside Dnepropetrovsk. Muller's platoon was supporting an infantry assault on a Soviet-held village called Novomoskovsk. Intelligence said light resistance. Intelligence was wrong. The Soviets had positioned 3 T-34s in defilade positions around the village, hull down behind earthen berms, only their turrets visible. They let the German infantry advance halfway across the open field before opening fire. The first T-34 killed the lead German tank, Lieutenant Weber's Panzer IV, with a single shot through the turret front. The tank brewed up instantly, thick black smoke pouring from the hatches. Muller's voice cut through the radio. "All units, combat formation, advance and engage." His tank surged forward. Schmidt was already scanning through the optic. "Target, hold down position, 11 o'clock, for 120 meters." Hans's hand moved. He didn't think about it, didn't look. His hand dropped right. Fingers found the first AP round exactly where it should be. Lifted it, spun it, rammed it home. Up. 2.5 seconds. Schmidt fired. The round struck the T-34's turret, penetrated. Smoke poured out. Target, second position, 2 o'clock, 380 meters. Hans's hand was already moving. AP round. Up. 3 seconds. Schmidt fired. Hit. The T-34's turret flew off in a shower of sparks. Muller felt something shift in his chest. A strange excitement. They were faster. Noticeably faster. Target. Infantry position. 12 o'clock. 200 meters. Hans's hand went left without hesitation. Found he round. Loaded. Up. 2 seconds. The round detonated in the Soviet trench line. scattering bodies. A fourth T-34 appeared from behind a building, traversing toward them. Target, building corner, 10 o'clock, 310 meters. AP. Hans loaded, fired, hit. 5 kills in under 3 minutes. The Soviet attack broke. The remaining tanks withdrew. The German infantry surged forward. In the turret, Schmidt turned to look at Hans, his face lit with something between shock and joy. Mein Gott, how are you doing that? Hans was breathing hard, but his hands were steady. The system works. Muller keyed the company frequency. All units, cease fire. Advance to consolidate. Then he switched to intercom, his voice quiet. Kemper, when we get back, you're going to teach every loader in this company what you just did. Word spread fast. By the end of the week, half the loaders in Second Company had reorganized their ammunition using Hans's system. By the end of the month, the entire battalion knew about it. They called it the Kemperladen. Kemper loading. Official doctrine didn't change. There was no written order, no manual update, no formal recognition. But company commanders quietly encouraged it. Experienced crews adopted it. New loaders were taught both methods, the official one for inspections, the Kemper one for combat. Reload times across the division dropped from an average of 7.8 seconds to 4.2 seconds. That might not sound like much, 3.5 seconds. But in combat, 3.5 seconds was the difference between a first-round kill and becoming a burning wreck. It was the difference between engaging 3 targets before the enemy reacted and engaging one before taking return fire. It was the difference between survival and death. Hans never received a medal for it, never got official recognition. The system was too simple, too obvious, too embarrassing for senior officers to acknowledge. How could they admit that a teenage farmhand had solved a problem their entire Armor Development Corps had missed? But the tank crews knew. They knew who'd saved their lives. Hans Kemper survived the war, though his tank didn't. In January 1945, during the retreat through Poland, Muller's Panzer IV took a hit from a Soviet IS-2 heavy tank. The round penetrated the front plate, killed Muller and Schmidt instantly. Hans was thrown from the turret by the blast, broke 3 ribs in his left arm, woke up in a field hospital 3 days later. He spent the last months of the war in a prisoner camp, was released in October 1946, made his way back to Bavaria. The farm was still there. His father had kept it running. His sisters had married. Life had moved on without him. Hans never talked about the war, never mentioned the system he'd created, the lives it had saved. He went back to farming, married a girl from the next village, raised 2 sons and a daughter. But sometimes, late at night, his hands would move in his sleep, reaching, grabbing, loading shells that weren't there anymore. The Kemper loading system was never officially adopted by the Wehrmacht. It disappeared into history, unrecorded, unacknowledged, but it lived on in the crews who used it, in the tank loaders who survived because of it, in the quiet knowledge passed between combat veterans that sometimes the simplest solutions are the ones the manuals never think to write down. Modern armor crews, German and otherwise, trained using variations of the same principle. Ammunition arranged by probability of use. Positioned by natural hand motion. Economy of movement over doctrine. They don't call it the Kemper loading anymore. They don't call it anything. But every loader who's ever reached for a shell in the dark, every crew that's ever survived because they fired 3 seconds faster than the enemy, owes something to a 19-year-old farmhand from Bavaria who looked at a broken system and asked the simplest question anyone can ask. Why are we doing it this way? The Panzer IV that carried Hans through 14 months of combat, Tactical Number 631, was destroyed in January 1945. No pieces of it remain. No museum houses it. No monument marks where it burned. But the idea lived on. And in war, ideas are the only things that survive.